Hi, Jen. It's noon. Should we go ahead and get our meeting started?
Yes, please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is a continuation of the Action Plan and Budget Committee meeting. It's May 3rd, 2022. It is now noon. May we have a roll call, please?
Director Sear,
Present.
Director Holman,
Here.
and Director Riffle.
Here.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Before we go to oral comment, Jen, could you please read the, or do we need to do that?
I'm happy to. We do not have any, we only have staff on the line, so.
Oh, okay. All right. We can
I
dispense with that.
think we can sufficient to say that this meeting is being held virtually in accordance with AB 361 and that everyone is participating remotely. Members of the public can comment using the public comment form, which is online.
Great. I like that version much better. Thank you. And then we can probably also ask for public comment, but just what you said, we don't have public. So I think we're good to go with that.
That is correct. And we did not have any members of the public submit written comments to be read into the record either.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm just checking one thing. Great, okay. Okay, with that, we're back. So I think the last we were speaking with was about to go to Brian, but I'll ask staff to kind of pick it up where we left off.
Do we need to adopt the agenda?
Happy to do that. I don't know that we got an agenda, but
There was an agenda and minutes for this one, draft minutes from the April 28th meeting.
oh, there was?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I did not see them. So sorry about that.
This is Director Sear. I move adoption of the agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the agenda. I'll vote, roll call vote, please.
Director Sear,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
and Director Riffle.
Yes,
Motion passes 3-0.
okay.
I will move approval of the April 28th, 2022 Action Plan and Budget Committee minutes.
I have to admit, I overlooked them and have not reviewed them.
And I obviously didn't see them either, so.
If the committee would
Take a
like, you
minute.
can continue it to the next meeting, although the next ABC meeting may be next year, depending on what comes up during the year, but they can be continued to the following meeting if you'd like.
I didn't notice any corrections necessary for them.
Well, can these be passed with 2 abstentions? I'm assuming Director Holman will abstain because I'm going to.
It will require a majority vote, is my
Okay.
understanding.
It would also be something you could scan in just a couple of minutes. If you want to take 2 minutes out to do that.
Yeah,
Can I suggest this? It's like, can we, an alternative so that the minutes are approved by the time this goes to the full board? Is it possible we could convene a 10-minute meeting at some point before the board just to do the adoption of the minutes? And that way we're kind of clean and good. Is that possible? What do you guys think?
I kind of like Director Sear's approach. If we need to get this done, let's just take a few minutes. I'll take each other's word. Let's take a look at them and then we can just take care of it and don't have to spend more time. Is that all right with you, Karen?
It's fine.
All right, let's do it then.
I have to go find them.
Well,
I can resend them right now. It's about 2.5 pages and it's about a page and a little bit of actual content, I guess.
Okay.
And I'm emailing them now.
While you're doing that, congratulations again to staff for a fabulous 50th at Ravenswood.
It was spectacular.
Okay, I received them. Thanks, Jen.
There we go.
So let's just take a few minutes and review them. I guess for Karen and me, Jed, I assume you already have.
Yeah, but I'll review them again real quickly. So
Okay. Directors, have you had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have one comment, which is on page 2, next to last paragraph. My comment was much broader. I did comment that the Fremont Holder home needs repair, but my inquiry was about if the budgeted amount includes broadly district-wide energy efficiency things such as weather stripping, water heaters, that sort of thing. In terms of energy efficiency across the district, it wasn't specific to Fremont Older at all. Does that make sense?
Yes, Director Holman, I'm happy to go back and listen to the recording in order to capture that information if you would like.
Yeah, I said I was appreciative of the response. They listed 3 or 4 properties that have historic status, but I said my comment was really much broader. It had to do with, insulation, refrigerator replacement, water heater replacement. So it's much more broad. So I think that's what you'll find, but I have that comment on the minutes. Otherwise, I don't see anything else.
Okay. I am fine with the minutes as they are. So may we have a motion to approve the minutes with future updates as the recording applies.
Having to do with comments on page 2 by Director Holman, I'd second that.
So I have a motion from Director Seer and a second from Director Holman.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do the vote. Director Seer,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes, and that does capture with any findings from the listening to the recording, correct?
yes, it does.
Okay, all right, yes.
And Director Riffle.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
All right. Thank you. All right. I hope we can now get on to business at hand, unless there's something else I'm forgetting. If so, staff, take it away.
Thank you, Director Seer. This is Stefan Jaskulak, CFO. Before we go to part 2 of the budget, there is another item on the agenda that is the update or review or affirmation of the financial policies. I'm wondering if hopefully there'll be a 2-minute item. We get that out of the way first, if that's appropriate. So it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of the bigger item of the budget. As you know, each year, is that okay? I dive in real quick.
Yes. Yes.
So there are several board policies, board level finance policies, and each year we ask for, staff reviews the policies and recommends any changes or adjustments. And then also we ask for reaffirmation of 3 policies by the board. There's the debt management policy, the statement of investment, and then also the disclosure policy. We've consulted with Mike Foster, controller. We've talked to the auditor. We've talked to Jackie Jennings at the Disclosure Council, and there are no proposed changes other than one minor update to policy number 3.07, which is the fund balance policy. We had one of the committed funds that is specifically established for the Hunt promissory note. As you may remember, we put $300,000 per year in to save up 1.5 million to retire that note. I'd like to propose to rename that policy, not that policy, but that committed fund, to a more general thinking fund for debt, basically, because we will also be putting $6.3 million for the retirement of the parity bond in there. So a more general term would be much better suited rather than specifically for the Hunt note. And that's the only change we're proposing.
Stefan, could you direct us to a page number in the binder, please, section and such?
Oh, it's not in the binder. It's a separate board item. separate committee item.
We're on item number 2 for the agenda.
And Director Holman, this is District Clerk Jennifer Woodworth. I did send that out as well in case the committee members didn't see it. I did just email it to all of you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
So the only real change then, Stefan, if I could summarize what you just said, is item 3 is section 3.07.
Correct. That is generalizing the committed funds, reserve fund,
Right.
sinking fund for the hunt node, basically generalizing it for debt service.
Right. Okay. I'll ask for any board questions. Karen, do you want a few more minutes to read?
No, it looks fine to me.
Okay. So no more questions. Jen, we don't have any public, looks like, do we,
No, we do not have any public comments for this item.
for this item? Okay, so we'll go back to the board. If there's no other questions or discussions, may we have a motion for this item?
I'll move approval of the recommendation.
This is Director Sear, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Hello?
Oops. Jen, did we lose you?
Oh, where is she faded out?
Looks like you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
we can.
My
now we can.
apologies, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take the vote for that. Director Seer,
Yes,
Director Holman,
Yes,
and Director Ripple.
Yes,
Motion passes 3-0.
fantastic. Okay,
Thank you. I appreciate you taking this item real quick, and that way we don't forget about it and we're good to go.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's go back to the budget. I understand that the committee would like to spend a little bit.
excuse me just a second. Does that mean that the suggested change that we had would then go to the full board? Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. Sorry, if I forgot to mention it, yes, that'll go before the full board on the June meeting, which June 8th, thereabouts.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's a good question. Thank you. So it's my understanding that the committee would like a little bit more information on the requested positions. So we can jump back to that section real quick. Oh, I'm supposed to take control.
well, Stefan is doing this. I had a chance to chat with Stefan briefly about this item and just reflecting on some feedback that we have received from some of our colleagues on the board about the number of people that we're hiring and so on. I just asked to make sure that we've had a chance to look at this and really understand it, just so that we can provide feedback to staff before it goes to the full board. So thank you, Stefan.
You're welcome. And I put a few extra slides in the presentation to break it out, if you will. So as we stated last week, we're requesting 8 new FTEs for FY23. And they're broken down. Basically, 2 would be support staff, AO staff, if you will, and then 6 of them are field oriented. Some of them may have a desk in the AO, but they're field oriented. So on the 2 support staff, they support board priorities. So one of them is a diversity, inclusion, equity, DEI management analyst in HR, and that will be projected to be hired definitely in the second part of the fiscal year, perhaps even in the fourth quarter. We're also looking to add a grants program management analyst, and that is to expand our grants capacity since we are fully maxed out with the number of grants we can apply and manage. Applying is one thing, but once you get the grant, you have to manage the reporting and the expectations, et cetera. And this would also be focused more on federal funding that we need for definitely for Highway 17. And the other 6 are field oriented. So in land and facilities, there's 3 requests. One of them is a field resource specialist. As you know, last year the board approved 1 field resource specialist. And this way, by adding a second, there will be a split between SFO and FFO. Also heavy support for the fuel management and fire resiliency programs. Also property management specialist with the addition of more properties and leases on the coast. The property management was already pretty heavily loaded with all the leases, both residential and grazing, but also keeping a good eye on all the easements and such, and adding one where the capacity is needed at this point. And then also a resource lead OST in LNF, also with the pending acquisition of Cloverdale. We need additional capacity on the coast. In natural resources, there's a resource management specialist in vegetation, also with heavy focus on the coast. And then visitor services, 1 additional ranger, given the additional acreage. We're looking to expand by more than 10% in the next year, as well as 1 overfill. As you know, from time to time there is natural attrition anywhere in the organization, but especially in the ranger ranks, it takes longer to fill a vacancy because it takes up to 1.5 years, including the ranger training and academy and field training and such. They have a longer lead time. So 1 overfill would be more like a floater that can slot in when there is a vacancy, alleviating some of the pressures there. So with that high level overview, let me see.
Stefan, could I add a little bit more too?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So before we go into, I don't know if you were going to go into interns next, but I wanted to give another overview on these 8 positions. We have a lot of great momentum right now on our DEI goals as an organization. I know I've talked to the board before about all the great work and the strategies that have come up through the 2 different DEI staff teams that happened in 2020 and 2021. And so the DEI management analyst is one of the recommendations that was brought forth as part of those strategies. So it would help us continue to move the needle forward in fulfilling and furthering our goals around DEI. It's also a position that would bring in expertise that we don't technically have around DEI, hiring, recruitment, development, proactive networking. There are folks out there who have a very strong focus and emphasis, training, and now expertise on how to proactively develop networks and contacts so that they have things already in the pipeline for where to reach out in a much broader way when we're doing hirings and recruitments. We have our traditional, paths, but this would allow us to really expand that further to those other pathways that we haven't really tapped into, and to also develop strong bonds with the academic institutions that, again, we really don't have at this time, and others. And so that's why this particular position is identified now, and one that we see as something important to move, again, that needle further. The grants program management analyst, Stefan showed you the graph of our grants program and the amount of funding that we've been able to increase over time. Before our grants program was really established, we were hovering on a good year around $1 million a year, but typically it was more around the $100,000 a year. Now with our 2 grants program folks, I think last year we were like at 6-7 million, Stefan, if I remember correctly. So it has brought in significant funding for us. And unfortunately, we're also tapped out with what we can have that grants program do for us. And we know that there's significant federal funding, especially now with the Biden administration, that where there's funds available where we know we're eligible, but we can't actively pursue at this time because we are just maxed out. And if I compare ourselves with East Bay Regional Park District, they bring in incredible amounts of money, much more than we do. So we do have certainly an ability to expand that further and leverage public tax dollars further. We talked about the coastal management plan with you a little while ago. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions are all in that coastal management plan. And if you recall, all of that is being driven by the amount of acreage that we have acquired and are expected to acquire in the next couple of years, which is substantial for us. And so it's patrol, it's maintenance, it's stewardship, it's maintaining all of the new public access facilities that we're in the middle of designing and constructing. So all those positions are important for us to be able to meet our commitments and our obligations regarding land and facilities in those areas. Plus, the big other driver that I think is really critical for us as MidPen is that these positions will also help us further integrate MidPen into the coastside community, which is, I think, really important to build deeper relationships there, the way we have along the Skyline Ridge corridor and elsewhere within our jurisdiction. And then finally, that overfill position for ranger, that's something that we really do need because we're constantly underfilled because of either vacancies, leaves, or other issues where we're down capacity in our ranger ranks. So that's the reason why that one's being forwarded now as well. I'll stop there, and if you have any questions, I'll dive into those.
Before we go to, thank you, Anna. And before we go to questions, Stefan, did you have other slides? I think at this point, I'd like to make sure we get through all the slides and then we'll ask questions rather than questions by slide.
All right. Yeah, I do have this is the chart that's in the attachment 2. What is it? Section 2, it's in tab 3, regarding the FOSM staffing levels. As you know, we're going to significantly refresh the FOSM starting this summer in FY23, basically. But for the first 5 to 10 years, the FOSM has been a very good guideline. Growth was pretty remarkable in the first 5 years, and that was intentional. We hired 52 people, which was within the bandwidth, well, one over the bandwidth, so it's within the bandwidth, basically. And then between 2020 to 2045, we have a bandwidth of up to another 57. 2 years ago, which is with the start of that bandwidth, the new bandwidth, we didn't do any. There was 0 requests. If you remember, that was right when the pandemic hit. So we were all being very conservative, cautious, not knowing what was going to happen. Last year, we added 3, and then this year we're requesting 8, so an average of 4 per year, which is very steady growth. And then for future years, FY24 and beyond, we will look to the refresh of the FOSM as far as headcount. Then I do also have a slide on I do have a slide if I can get to it. There we go. On the internship program. The internship program has been active at MidPen for at least for as long as I've been here, and before that, I know. It's fluctuated in headcount. Sometimes it's 2 in a year, sometimes it's 5. During the pandemic, it slowed down a little bit. Before the pandemic hit, we had conversations internally to formalize it and to broaden the program. With the shutdown, of course, we did not. So now we're highlighting it. We're looking at a total of 8 interns, but 5 of them we already had last year. And when I say had them, those are not the individuals, but the slots. And an intern slot is up to about 900, up to about 6 months, basically. They're paid, they're not paid a lot. They're also related to a study program and doing up experience with Mid-Penn, whether it's with a particular department or a general idea. They're about 30,000 a year. They're not benefited, and we can increase it or decrease it as our needs may shift year over year. It served us very well. Casey just reminded me that half of the IST staff used to be interns at one point and either went away to something else and then came back when openings came, or flowed right through from intern to permanent slot. There's also a lot of good interns that wind up at partner agencies, at RCD or at Post. So it really benefits Mid-Penn in particular, but also our industry, if you will, to have a good, robust intern program, teaching the pipeline for future employees, for future conservationists, people interested in the mission and in the work that we do. I've created a list here of the interns that we are proposing and planning on for FY23. 2 in natural resources. Natural resources had a very strong intern program for years. 1 in HR, a generalist in HR, and I know one of the issues a lot of times with HR, even entry-level positions, people say, well, you don't have any HR experience. It's very difficult to get HR experience without an internship. IST has had a strong intern program, both on the IT side and the GIS side from time to time. So they like to revive their part of it by adding an IT intern. Planning 2 interns, they had 2 last year, and they would like to continue the program. And then public affairs, I believe had 1 intern last year and would like to do 2 this year and basically alternate them, so have 1 in the summer and 1 in the wintertime. They learn a lot while working. Of course, we benefit from that as well. Aside from supporting the pipeline and the general industry, we also get work out of them, of course, and they do contribute to our productivity as well. And I believe that is my last slide on the staffing section.
And Stefan, one more thing that I just want to add and just sort of emphasize for the board is these are annual, essentially. The budgets are approved annually. So if for some reason in the future we needed to cut back or constrain the budget in some way, we could defer hiring of these positions in future years. So they're not year over year. They are 1-year positions. In fact, their cap in terms of hours is 960 hours per year. So again, if for some reason we had to either cut down or completely defer the internship program, we could. And that would be a year, an annual type of decision that we would make.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. So Stefan, is this a good point to add for questions or comments before we
Yes,
proceed?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay. I have a few, but I'll open up to my colleagues. Questions or comments for Stefan and Anna?
I do, but I was muted. So a handful. Thank you very much. This is helpful. So the ranger overfill, I'm not quite clear what that is. Is that a full-time position that roves around to fill when there are vacancies? I'm not clear on what that position is.
Yeah, so Brian Malone, Assistant General Manager. What has happened over the years, partially because it takes so long to recruit and then train a ranger, is that we chronically have openings in the ranger ranks. To meet our basic patrol service needs, we have minimum staffing. So if we have fewer rangers because of leaves or because someone retires or takes a different job, those openings have a big impact on our ability to provide minimum patrol coverage. And it ends up impacting current staff, sometimes through having to do overtime or, particularly on weekends where our staffing is our heaviest staffing due to the need, of course, for visitation. So having a regular position, so a board approved position that will be filled when it's open, although we could make a judgment call whether we're going to do a recruitment if that was the only opening, just the overfill position. But from our past experience, it would just allow us to keep at full staffing and make our basic minimum staffing coverages by having this overfill position. And yes, unlike another ranger position that might be assigned to Skyline or our south area or foothills or the coastal area, this position would know going into it, the person, that they may have to do coverage in any of those areas. And in our training program, bringing people on, we also give them experience in each of the areas so that they'll be ready to handle that.
So a little bit of clarification still, and I'm sorry if I'm just not grasping this. So why would recruitment for this position be quicker than recruitment for a regular ranger position?
It is not quicker at all. They go through entirely the same process. It's just that you would already have a position filled that could backfill for any openings that you had in the ranger ranks.
So it's a standing position then, a permanent position. Okay.
We call them regular positions, but all of our regular positions.
Okay. Okay. So it'd be a regular position and they would just spot fill wherever necessary over the course of any given year.
Correct.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. I have a couple more questions.
Karen, may I ask a follow-up question to that since we're on that topic? Brian, that was really helpful. But so if we have this person, let's say a ranger in that position, another position becomes vacant or whatever. Does this person in effect kind of move into that position and therefore the overfill position then is backfilled? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so just like any opening, whether it was just in a different area, we would give current staff the ability to move around, and you would most likely a person assigned to the overfill position would be interested in a regular station assignment.
I see.
Unless for their living arrangement, that open position was not convenient, and then maybe they would want to stay there. We would. So if we had an opening that was not the overfill position, of course, at the next available opportunity, we would do a recruitment. With the overfill position, we would have the option to take a look at it, kind of do some forecasting of what our positions need and maybe defer doing that recruitment or maybe go ahead and do our recruitment to backfill that position.
I see. So somebody could be in the overfill position for years if that's because they like it. Is that right?
Yeah, if they liked that the opportunity to move around more frequently.
Oh, I got it. Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you, Director Holman.
Okay, you bet. I have a question. I always forget what his job title is, but Josh. So. Remind me, Stefan, what's his title?
Government Affairs Specialist.
Yeah, Legislative Affairs Specialist.
Legislative Affairs. Okay, thank you.
I think.
Governmental.
So see, even among us, we have different. So if I'm recalling correctly, excuse me. If I'm recalling correctly, and this goes sort of hand in glove with the grants, that department, which is basically him, and then there are consultants, outside consultants, is really stretched because if I remember correctly, when we were talking about moving one of the pieces of legislation from a tier 2 to a tier 1 or tier 3 to a tier 2, something like that, we were asking like, why isn't it higher? It says bandwidth, if I'm remembering this correctly. So there's a lot of, well, there's a budget surplus that's of considerable size at the state level. And there are a number of things that we're tracking at the state. So I'm just wondering, and I know that you said that there's been indication that there are more positions requested than you've come forth with on an appreciate the tight belt. But I'm just wondering if that's a location where we maybe ought to consider what, another position, another halftime position, or because I think there seems to be a likelihood that there could be not only programmatic and policy advancements with more support there, but also potentially financial benefit.
So yeah, there's a couple of things I want to raise for this one. For one, the planning, the public affairs interns, at least a portion of time from one of those interns would help support the governmental affairs program. So there would be additional support there for that particular program through the internships here that we have. As you know, a lot of the legislative work is seasonal, so to speak. There's a period of time during the year when it's very intensive. And that's where most of the support really needs to come in, is during that time period. Looking at future regular positions, I think that's something to consider in the future as a possibility. I think it's a little early at this time, given all the other priorities that we have as a district. I know in the conversations I've had and the board has had with each other in past board meetings around both the legislative program, but also when we were discussing the additional issues that Mid-Penn could take on. It still remained largely focused on sort of our core areas of responsibility in our program. So I don't have the sense right now that the board is wanting to expand that just yet. There is a possibility that that happens in the coming years and maybe more in the near term than the later years. But I get a sense, I do have a sense right now that as a body, that's a little early. And so it is something I think that we can park for the right time. And again, it might be sooner than later, but it does feel like it's probably maybe a year or two out.
I appreciate that. And at the same time, well, it may come up at the board. I may bring it up at the board, but I hear what you're saying. If there's a way to broach this or give some, flesh out this topic for the board consideration, that would be really appreciated. And the other reason I bring it up is because there are some things that in conversation with people in other, sort of like-minded organizations, I think there's a lot of synergy around some of the topics that aren't being addressed because of bandwidth, perhaps timing too, where we would get a lot of support and cross support for advancement of things that are core issues to Mid-Penn. So if there's a way to kind of present that for the board to consider.
One other thing too that I think ties really well with kind of your thinking, Director Holman, is we do have our FOSM update that we're kicking off in FY23, which is literally around the corner. And as part of that update, we do start to look more carefully and in more detail what the needs of the organization will be, at least for the next 5 years, and kind of bigger beyond that. So that does present a very good opportunity to vet that question deeper. And
thank you for that. Remind me how long the FOSM study shall take.
Oh, we're hoping, Stefan, maybe a year. We haven't kicked it off just yet, but that's and I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Stefan, since you're helping lead that.
I'm hoping it's only a year as well.
Okay. Yeah. Still interesting to me if we could have at least a preliminary discussion, which might help inform the FOSM too. So my last question is the grants staff. I was looking at, help me understand something here. So the grants that were indicated were like 6 to 7 million income, but on section 2, pages 3 and 4, it indicates that the revenue is 3.4. So help me understand the difference there. And the other thing is this staff would support not only getting incoming grants, but also manage MidPenn's programmatic grants that we give to other organizations, other entities. It's
Right.
two-pronged.
Yeah, it is two-pronged. Yes, the grants management grants program also manages the outgoing grants, if you will.
Mhm,
And the board just recently approved the second round of that.
mhm,
So that's pretty well embedded in the program already. The additional capacity is much needed in bringing in additional grants, bringing more money in.
mhm.
And there is a difference between the table that you're asking about and how much is committed in a year, because the table is dependent on, first of all, what has been committed to MidPenn, what has been inked, if you will, and been signed.
Mhm.
But then we look at those projects that those grants are related to, and okay, how much of these projects can we ask for reimbursement? What monies? And that is what is in the table. So even though, for example, we're getting a new grant, $1 million grant from Valley Water for IPM work, but it's 200,000 per year. So we would include that 200,000 per year in the table because that is what was committed, and that is what we will reimburse in those particular years. But the entire grant achievement is $1 million. So that's kind of where it cycles through. You say, yes, we have commitments for X dollars, but in FY23, we'll only be able to reimburse ourselves or receive reimbursement for 3-point-something million. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And so you're saying that we have probably a series of those where the year of the income would be where it would show up in a revenue table.
Right.
But there are a series of those, it sounds like, to make up the difference between 3.4 and 6 or so.
Yeah. And they're
Okay.
all spread out over multiple fiscal years.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you a lot for that.
Sure.
Is that all that you had, Director Holman?
Yes.
All right, Director Sear, any questions before we proceed?
No, I think we can move forward. Thank you. Very helpful. I appreciate the extra effort that went into these.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Sear. And I would concur with Director Sear. This, Stefan and Anna, thank you so much for putting these in. It looks like you have already inserted these, Stefan. I was just looking at the slide numbers where you would put these into the slide set.
They are in there and also with an eye on the board presentation later this month.
That's exactly where I was going, having this discussion, because if I look at the slides that were in what we covered on in our last meeting, these would have been very helpful to have. So thank you for doing that. And I'm not sure where we ended up with Director Holman's suggestion about suggesting a legislative person. I frankly would rather staff not go there. And Director Holman, if you would like to bring it up during board discussion, certainly can do that. That would be my recommendation. Is that all right with you?
That's fine with me. And if it saves staff kind of trying to write up in a staff report something additional to explain the topic, then that's fine with me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. And then finally, on this, in fact, this very slide, Anna, and it was really helpful because I frankly lost track of our interns and how that whole program works. So again, I'm very much in favor of it, but spending a little bit of time just making sure we're all on the same page as how the intern program works and how we determine that every year and how many new people we'll have. Because not only is it an opportunity for interns, but this takes staff time, right? And so having interns is actually kind of a new workload on staff. So that's important for us to understand as well. So thanks for doing that. Okay, if there's no other comments on these slides, I think we can jump back into our the rest of the budget. And it's now 12:45.
I'll try to forward to the programs and before I completely turn it over. I lost.
Stefan, just I guess, did we want to ask the committee, were there any questions on the material that was presented last week, or would you like to dive into this, get through this, and then we can go back and revisit any materials?
It really depends on the time that we have. We have, I believe, until 4 o'clock, so we have a little bit over 3 hours.
Yeah.
In the past, I know we've taken about 30 minutes per program. We have 4 programs.
Okay.
Also based on conversations at Ravenswood this weekend, I've also spoken with the AGMs, Brian Malone and Susanna Chan, really also kind of highlight what has changed since the board retreat in March, when we discussed all the projects and the programs.
Yeah.
To maybe even streamline our conversations here and help the committee along as well.
Okay.
And then if you would like, then after, if we cover all the programs, if there's any other questions out there, we could circle back. If
Let's do that.
If that approach works for you.
And I think that's a great idea, if that's okay with my colleagues, as well as I think we should allow Susanna and Brian to do their spiel. And then maybe at the end of each of their sections, we'll come back and do questions rather than the slide-by-slide questions, because that can take a lot of time. Is that all right with my colleagues?
Yeah, and to be clear, it's like, I do have something else at 4, but also we have to get this done. So I'd indicated an email. It's like, if I have to be late to that, I have to be late to that, because we have to get this done. So I don't want to shortchange this.
Great. Okay. Stefan, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Then I will actually turn it over to Brian.
Good afternoon, Brian Malone, Assistant General Manager. And just to reiterate, our intent is to move through things fairly quickly and just highlight a couple of projects per program. And that is not to, gloss over anything. It's to give the board more opportunity for questions on particular projects that you may have. And my section here is just the introduction section. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly to give us more time to look at the actual programs. This is the kind of classic slide where we look at the overall 4 program areas: land acquisition, preservation, natural resource protection, restoration, public access, and assets and organizational support. As you can see on the top, you're just looking at the dollar amounts. That's in the green chart. And then in the pie chart, you're looking at the total number of projects. On the bottom chart, it's broken down a little bit more by key projects and supporting projects, and then with a percentage of each, and then comparative between last year or this current fiscal year and the proposed next fiscal year. I will mention, as always, that land acquisition and preservation is small because we don't include potential acquisitions. Those are approved at the time of acquisition. And then here's just the trending over a number of years since fiscal year 17. You can see a little up and down, but relative consistency as well. Certainly adding more individual number of projects, particularly to natural resources, as we've expanded some of those. And some of those expansions is outside the natural resources department, but still fall in that general category. And then just a quick reminder, our 4 program areas that are shown with their icons. And then we have 3 areas of interest that the board has asked to be highlighted as well. As we go through, you'll see the icons for the areas of interest for agriculture, diversity, and fire prevention, highlighted along with those projects that support those general areas of interest. And then here's, so I think this is the first time we've presented this slide, but just showing the number of projects in each area of interest. And you'll see that the diversity project, which is the largest number of projects, because increasing access is one of the major ways of increasing the diversity of our visitors and our impact on the public. That's where you'll see a lot of those particularly capital projects represented in the diversity category. And of course, our agricultural projects, we have had numerous and a little bit fluctuation, but kind of a steady growth there. And certainly growth since initially in FY20 for the wildland fire resiliency programs, although even those programs tend to be broad categories as we go into the specifics of talking about the projects. So they're in broad geographic extent for like one project, say we have covering the Skyline area. I will make a note just for Rafaela that the Teams chats are popping up on the screen. And then the specific areas of interest, I'm not going to go through in detail because they will be covered when we go through the program areas. So that's the agriculture. And I may have lost control. Oh, here we go. Whoa, now it's just slow. So with that, I will hand it off to Assistant General Manager Susanna Chan.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I'm Susanna Chan, Assistant General Manager. Finally, we're here to talk about our programs, and I will cover the Land Acquisition and Preservation Program. And Rafaela, if you don't mind, can you please advance the slide for me? So as mentioned earlier, this is the first year we developed a true 3-year capital improvement and action plan. The 3-year land acquisition and preservation program includes a total of 16 land acquisition projects and 1 operating project. And we'll be actively working on 12 projects in FY23. And then later on in FY24 and 25, we added a few projects. Today, I will just focus on highlighting a couple projects that we will be actively working on in FY23. And you will have the opportunity to look at the entire program later on in the presentation, and you will have the opportunity to ask any questions on any of those projects and provide feedback. So the slide before you summarize the projects that we are working on to bring in new lands to the district. And the projects that I wanted to highlight, it shouldn't be a surprise to you, is the Coverdale Wench project. You're familiar with Coverdale Wench. You know it's located on the San Mateo coast. It's approximately 6,500 acres. It is an important part of the coastal farming community of Pescadero, and the property is currently owned by Post. In 2021, the district was successful in securing 3 separate grants for the acquisition of Coverdale, bringing in close to $10 million that effectively closed the funding gap for us to acquire Coverdale Wench. One of the grants has the requirement of closing the escrow by end of March 2023. In order to meet that funding deadline, we have been working really hard to try to gather all the information so the board can consider the potential acquisitions close to end of this year. We have been working on gathering critical natural resources information, and the board already received the preliminary summary report late last year. We are also gathering all the infrastructure information, and information that we've been gathering will be presented to you shortly as well. You also recently received the presentation on the coastal management plan, which identified the staffing and facility needs to support the coastal mission as we expanding our land holding on the coast side, including Coverdale Wedge. So you have all those information as you consider, as the staff bringing the Coverdale property negotiation forward for your consideration. You have those informations for your considerations. Another big part of the work that we're working on as part of the Coverdale acquisition is public engagement. If the purchase is approved by the board, it would be the first time for the district to have a prominent presence in the San Mateo South Coast area. It is important for us to build a strong relationship with the coastal community, local community, so that they support and trust us as a neighbor and as part of the community. We have a very robust community engagement plan that we are working on. Just highlight a couple activities that we planned for the coastal community. We are planning to have a field trip to invite the local community members to visit one of the preserves that we already own on the coast side, so that they can learn the process that we have to go through from acquiring a property to managing and opening it to the public. We also have a field trip planned for them to look at the Coverdale property, so they understand the natural resources, the existing culture, existing agricultural use on site, and the work that we have to do for public access. Of course, so we're doing all those work in close collaboration with our partner Post. They are supporting us every step of the way. So again, FY23, one of our focus will be the Coverdale Wedge acquisition, and we'll be bringing the property negotiation to the board really, really soon. Another project that I want to highlight outside of the coastal area is the San Jose Water Company land project. We have been working very closely with San Jose Water Company, continue to look for opportunity to acquire their land that can support our mission. One of the piece of property that is in discussion right now is approximately 150 acres. It could be added to be part of Sierra Azul Preserve as a part of the land that will support future trail connections. We also in discussion with San Jose Water about some trail easement, including some that will support the Highway 17 project. We both understand that the SB 492, which allow property to be purchased under the Public Resource Code instead of Public Utility Code, will expire end of this year. This SB 492 can significantly streamline the process for acquisition of San Jose Water land. We wanted to take advantage of that. So there's certain urgency of working with San Jose Water, and we both parties understand that timeline, and we're working really actively and hope to complete the acquisition in FY23. So I think those are the two projects that I want to highlight under the Land Acquisition and Preservation Program. And Rafaela, if you can advance this slide past this one. So here you are. This is the entire Land Acquisition and Preservation Program, a total of 16 projects that covers for the next 3 years. And I just wanted to pause here, give you a minute to look at the projects, and now I'm ready to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Susanna. So when we finish with the questions, then we move into the next section, right? So this is the opportunity for land acquisition, right?
That's right. I think that's
Okay.
we only have one supporting project, which is the document to
Right.
for the process for land acquisitions.
Right. Okay, good. All right. So at this point then, questions from my colleagues, both for Brian, because we didn't really pause on his slides, and or for Susanna. Questions?
I do, but not necessarily on this slide. There's some topics that weren't absolutely covered in either presentation. So where would I ask those? But they're in this section in the binder.
Okay, I think this would be the appropriate time. Is that okay with you, Steph? We just have to manage our time well.
Yes, right now we're in that land acquisition and preservation section. So if you have specific project questions on those, please provide those.
I had a question on agricultural project summary. And yeah, I had a question, I guess it would fit here, but it's not on the table. It's like, where would the new field office acquisition be included? A budgeted amount for that. And I know there's like a range, but where would that be included? And
At some, this is Stefan Jaschler, at some point that would be included in the fourth program, which is the I forgot the name of it, but yeah,
Organizational support.
yeah. So that will be in the fourth program, but it's not, there's no project for it just yet.
okay, so it wouldn't be in land acquisition. And then this is kind of a question that runs a little bit through a category of question that runs a little bit through is on page 5, page 5 of section 3 in the agricultural project summary. The first line that talks about basic policies for the coastal annexation area, and not for this next year, but it has policies. And I'm just kind of curious why policies have a cost associated with them. And if I can tag something else on that, there's some of these, and again, this kind of permeates a few different things. On some projects, there is a staff time or staff allocation cost, and many there is not. So I wasn't able to discern why some would have a staff cost and some wouldn't have a staff cost. So that question. So how do policies have a financial cost? And why do some projects show a staff cost impact and others don't?
Maybe I'll answer the first question. So for the basic policies, we can dive into it in more detail in the final program, which has to do with assets and organizational, I forget the name, organizational support. But if you look at page 118 of that, it does identify the scopes for FY 24 and 25, which is where the budget numbers are. And that funding would be for outreach and engagement activities. So expenses related to securing outside venues, doing any large poster prints, large scale printing notices across the area about a workshop or a meeting, any flyers or brochures that we might create as a result of that. So it's the support work to either arrive at the policies or implement the board approved policies and notify the public of those.
Okay, so it's not really the policies that create the staff cost. It's really the implementation of the policy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That creates the cost. Okay, that would have helped me understand that. Okay. And for some of the other projects, not policy particularly, but other projects, why there's staff cost associated with others that seem like would be similar in scale or scope, and design would require, it would seem to be similar staff cost, but no staff cost assigned.
And I assume that's, and Stefan, maybe you can confirm what I'm saying, but I'm assuming that that has to do with Measure AA eligible staff costs. So we do track separately hours so that we can be reimbursed through Measure AA funding, but it's limited. It's limited to on the ground construction or when we have a project lead that is managing the project. So we're only identifying staff costs for that purpose, so that we can then be, we can then reimburse that time.
Okay. So the short story, if I understood, check, if it's a Measure AA project, it's very different than if it's a non-Measure AA project. And that's, okay, thank you. That's very helpful. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you. Director Sear, any questions for either Brian or Susanna?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, Brian, on slide 49, I think it would be good to, you verbalized it, but I think on that slide is to footnote the land acquisition does not include money for actually acquiring land. I know, it just, that pie chart, if a member of the public saw that, they would say, what? You aren't buying land anymore. So I would just make sure that that's clear. And then on slide 50, is someone on, could someone flip the slides, please? Brian, I guess a question, it's interesting. This was a great slide and the downward trend, that's interesting, FY17 through FY21. You might want to mention at some point as to why that trend, and now we're kind of trending back up. Any thoughts about that? Or,
you know, the biggest caveat is that it doesn't reflect effort either with dollars or staff time. And sometimes the big, really important public access projects actually draw in more of that effort, and you don't have as much room on your action plan to complete other smaller projects. So a lot of that is flexibility, certainly not effort or expenditures. You wouldn't see the same trend.
And just to tie into that, without looking at these very specific project lists for each of these yet, because I don't have those in front of me, but one thing for the board to know is there are certain years where we will have moved numerous projects, typically Measure AA, into construction. And those years will carry higher budgets because the construction phase is so much more expensive than the early planning, feasibility, or design. So it could be also that certain years here, like 2017, was Mount Umunum Summit construction and La Honda Creek, Sears Ranch Road parking area and trails construction. So those carried big budgets to construct those capital improvement projects. So it does vary depending on where we are in the project phase for our various projects.
okay. Very helpful. Then Brian, just a very quick comment on slides 53 and 54, if you could go to those. Yeah, and I was a little confused by the last bullet and more. Why do we have that in there?
Oh, just because to choose a cutoff spot, because if you look at the full lists that are in the packet, they would take up more than a slide.
Well, yeah, I would say just lose that, because the purpose of these is just to highlight the important ones you guys wanted to highlight, right? Anyhow.
That's an easy fix.
Yeah, thank you. All right. And then Susanna, slide 59. Cal Water Property Rights Exchange. Did you cover? If you covered that, I missed it. What is that again?
No, I skipped that, but yes. So this is a project that we've been working on with Cal Water as part of the arrangement that Cal Water will get water tank easement.
Oh,
right.
right.
And then
I-
in exchange, we will get some multi-use trail easement and also the first right of refusal to purchase their watershed lands of over close to 1,300 acres.
Right. I remember that now. Okay, thank you.
We're still
And-
working on it, very close though. We're making good progress and hope to wrap it up in FY23.
That's great. And then on slide 60, these are all exciting projects, and it might be good just to remind the board that we will have our annual property update at some point, right? It's about this time of year. I forget when Mike does that, but those are always so helpful. So for example, El Mirador, which is a new project. I know about it, but I'm not sure the rest of the board does. So it might be a really good opportunity to just pitch when Mike's going to do his update again.
Right, yeah. So, and I can just briefly mention because I was focusing on FY23 and this is a FY25 project, but it is one of the exciting projects that that excites me on from this list. This property is located in the town of Portola Valley. It's about 200 acres and it's currently owned by Post. Actually, Post have 50% ownership. And the property has mature second growth redwoods, no harvesting since 1860. So it have some very mature redwoods on the property and could be an addition to our Windy Hill Open Space Preserve because it's right next to it. So properties that we are interested, and then we will be focused on that acquisition starting in FY25.
Great, thanks for that background. And is it, we will have our annual update with Mike at some point?
Right, Mike is up here. Mike.
Director Riffle, this is District Clerk Jennifer Woodworth. Yes, we are planning that for early June is our plan, and they will be virtual.
Great. Okay.
To be honest, I need to get them scheduled. We've just had a lot else going on with the move and the
Sure.
records. So that is the
Sure.
plan for early June.
Great. Thanks for confirming, Jen. I was just more interested in a rough timing, so that'll be really helpful for this discussion, actually. All right, that's all I had for Susanna and Brian. So thank you.
All right, now we'll go to our next program, Natural Resource Protection and Restoration. All right, and again, I have a bunch of programs highlighted here, but you'll also notice as when we went through the project numbers, there are 2 pages or 2 slides of projects. So, I'll take questions on all of those. I just wanted to highlight, because we have had a lot of questions, both from the board and the public, about our Highway 17 wildlife crossing and the trail crossing. And, it is a multi-year project. Right now, we're planning in the CEQA and NEPA, that's the National Environmental Protection Act review of the project. And then it'll be moving into design and permitting. But if you look at the schedule, that's a multi-year. So it'll really be the heavy lift on the design and permitting will be in fiscal year 24. And we won't even in this, at least what we've projected so far for this 3-year CIAP, won't get to construction. But that, that is the progress that we are steadily making. We're also working on the mitigation funding at the same time. And I did want to cheat a little bit. I wanted to combine our 2 projects in the same area for crossings, because we made a really important milestone. And I'm calling this All Creatures Great and Small, to reference a old book. But the Highway 17 crossing is really focused on some of our larger creatures like mountain lions and deer for public safety, and also to have that important connection to connect their breeding areas and different populations, particularly for mountain lions, so that the genetic pool is connected and is not weakened. That's really one of the major concerns, even more so than just numbers of mountain lions in our area. So that is making progress, but it is a multi-year project. There is the chance for the public to get confused because the project further south on Laurel Curve that the Santa Cruz Land Trust is working on has actually started construction. So if you're going to Santa Cruz or back and forth, you will actually see construction equipment on Laurel Curve now. That is not our project, but is very complementary to our project, just as the work that Post and our partners in the Open Space Authority are doing in Coyote Valley. All these connections work together to really provide that habitat connectivity. But then to get to our Creatures Small, our new crossing, we got an agreement with Santa Clara County Roads to work on that project. So now we can really move forward into the design phase, and we have a request for proposals out to look at designing a crossing for newts on Alma Bridge Road. So it really, we're looking at the large and the small, and looking for a solution for all the deaths that are happening on Alma Bridge Road. These are long-term projects. Probably in the end, I would hope that the Alma Bridge we would get done sooner because it's a much smaller scale and you're not dealing with the highway. But they're both progressing and they're both a big part of this program and one of the major projects that we're looking at delivering eventually. And with that, I want to move on and highlight our wildfire program development. If you're out and about, you will see a lot of activity right now, and then there's activity moving forward, and particularly the State Coastal Conservancy grant that we're working with. One of the initial actions that we took is clearing important staging areas around our parking lot. So if you go to Montebello, Los Trancos, you'll see that work done. There's work in progress now at Skyline Ridge. We will be moving on into the next fiscal year to continue work in Thornwood Preserve, Windy Hill with additional work in the lower area of the preserve, the sequoias and our fire access roads, also getting into Teague Hill and Russian Ridge. In Purisma Creek, we're starting some work coming up this month in Irish Ridge that will continue both Jubata and Acacia work. As you know, the big for the restoration project with the Acacia plantation is moving forward as well. And then with our Los Gatos Creek watershed project, we are going to start beginning the work in Bear Creek. If you heard the negative news about the state vegetation program that was supposed to expedite work, our project at Bear Creek is one of those projects, and we are going to be one of the first projects to initiate and make use of that vegetative program. And we hope to be a really good example of how you use that state program to do the work at Bear Creek. And then the wider Los Gatos Creek watershed funding will also fund work at Cathedral Oaks, and that's a cooperative project with the Santa Clara Fire Safe and San Jose Water and Santa Clara County Park. So, and then all our normal fuel reduction implementation is layered on top of that, where we're really looking at areas where we can do fuel reduction and habitat improvements. I do want to highlight our website is a really good resource to look at recently completed projects. If you go to our Wildland Fire Resiliency Program page and also upcoming projects, so you'll see all the projects that I just talked about listed on there. And most of them are a part of these three projects listed there. So that's, and I did cheat a little, I admit to that, but those are the two projects with a little bit of combining projects that I wanted to highlight today for our natural resource and protection. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump forward past the list just to look at the supporting projects. I think you're familiar with most of these. Our agricultural policy, we hope to be wrapping up in early fiscal year 23. And then we're really diving into drought response and resiliency and a water quality monitoring program. But then I'll go back to the list, which covers 2 pages, but open it up to board questions for any projects on this list.
All right, thank you, Brian. Colleagues, questions for Brian?
I do, but I'd like to offer up to Jed to go first.
No, I'm fine right now.
So, yeah, on page 25, I do have a question then about groundwater well decommissioning. It's 80059. Is there possibility of getting Valley Water funding to do all or part of that work? Seems like something they'd have great interest in.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's something that we've looked into. I actually asked Kirk Lennington, Natural Resources Manager, to see if that's something they're aware of as a possibility for funding.
That would be great. Carbon storage study, San Gregorio watershed. Help me understand just a little bit about why that location?
Kirk, why don't you take both those?
All right, thank you. So Kirk Lennington, Natural Resources Manager. The possibility of funding from the Valley Water for groundwater wells, I don't think that that's available. They are functioning in a regulatory manner on this project, so they're actually issuing us permits for all these well closures. And so I just don't think that that's something that they're offering funding for. But I will check with my staff that's running that project and see if we've asked, but I'm just not expecting that they do have funding available for that.
Okay.
In terms of the carbon study, the reason we're working in San Gregorio is because we have quite a bit of work in that watershed. And so in addition to the La Honda Forest Plan, where we've done an assessment work of the upper La Honda Forest and developed a management plan, we're wanting to build off of that. One of the reasons for doing a treatment within that forest would be to increase the carbon sequestration rate of that forest habitat. And then additionally, we know a lot about those lands, and we are, that watershed, we're one of the largest landowners. It's certainly the watershed where we own the most acreage as a percentage. And so there's a lot of opportunities for us to work within that watershed. There's also a mix of working landscapes with both grazing and some agricultural uses, as well as quite a bit of riparian corridor habitat in that watershed. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and so it's a great place for us to be looking for our pilot project.
Okay, terrific. Then oversight of Lehigh Quarry activities, $193,000, and then it really tapers off to 18 and 18. I was surprised by the number, $193,000 in this next fiscal year. What might that be for or to cover?
Yeah, so the 2 primary things. So as you know, we now have a oversight role for the easement, the Ridgeline easement that really serves to protect Rancho San Antonio. So that we will be moving into initial assessment of that easement, and then ongoing assessment every year to keep the status of it. The bulk of this money, however, is if there is analysis needed for the environmental review of the reclamation plan amendment. Now, the status of that is a little bit up in the air because the Lehigh folks have stated that they intend to either amend their current 2019 application, or perhaps scrap it and submit a new one. As you know, the Supervisor Smithian with the County Board of Supervisors has also had a referral approved for county staff to look at the potential acquisition of Lehigh Quarry,
Mhm.
which clearly that would, if it were to happen, that would stop the ongoing mining activity and move more immediately into the reclamation phase. And as to what, that most likely, unless there was, it was in future years where there was additional mining activity, that could either happen under the current reclamation plan 2012, which wouldn't need additional analysis, or it could happen under a different reclamation plan if Lehigh decided to amend or submit it. So there is a lot of uncertainty, but
Mhm.
those are the two main areas where we would be looking to have funds available to review the environmental impact report and for our easement monitoring.
That's very helpful. Appreciate that. What caused me to question is just because I didn't know what it would be for, what was anticipated. And I appreciate that there's anticipatory funding needed that's covered here. What kind of caused me to go, is because it's a specific number. It's $193,000 as opposed to 190 or 200 or something like that. So I appreciate the clarification. And I think you've covered everything else that I had. Questions on those two tables? Yes, thank you.
And just a budgeting thing, sometimes you end up getting very specific numbers because you start with a estimate and then you add percentages of cost for various typical activities.
Okay, thanks, Brian. A couple of questions that I have for you on slide 64. I'm very interested in the climate action plan implementation, and I'm thinking, just to clarify, are we going to have an update as to how we did? And because I think it's every other year. And also, I think we're due for what, a 40% reduction by 2030. And having done a couple of these plans, they get harder and more expensive as you get further out, because the low-hanging fruit is already done, already picked. So just a question of kind of how are we going to be updated on where this is heading?
Kirk, did you want to go ahead and take that? I saw your camera turn on. You're muted, Kirk.
Indeed, I am. I was unmuted and I muted myself to start talking. Calendar year 22 is a year that we do the inventory for. And so we will start the data crunching in January and February of 23. And so that will fall within this fiscal year, but we won't start that work until 6 or 7 months from now. And then we will be coming to the board with our report later in the springtime, I assume, is when we'll have it completed, and then we'll have a report back on our progress in meeting our reduction goals. But in addition to that work, there is also additional work that's ongoing to reduce the emissions across all the sectors and all the district's operations, and we'll be reporting that to the board.
Great,
And
thanks,
then
Kirk.
Director Riffle, your comment of the low-hanging fruit, that is very true. So it will get more difficult, and we will have to make more difficult choices as we move forward. And we're looking to hit our climate goals and as much as possible not impact our support of our ongoing work for our mission as well. Certainly the liberalized telecommute policy coming out of COVID, which is really much more expansive than was originally envisioned when we were looking at amending the telecomute policy for, in part, climate action plan implementation, we have many more people commuting for more days, telecommuting for more days than was anticipated, say, in 2019. So that is a big factor, but yes, more yet to be done. I would say the fleet transition plan is a huge part of that. We really, would like to move towards electrics as we can. But even in our gas-powered fleet, acquiring them has become quite difficult. We have 3 vehicles that we ordered after approval by the board for this current fiscal year, I should say, that were ordered early in the fiscal year that still have not even been designated for production yet. So we will really be looking forward to how we can transition our fleet with that plan, and we may have to inch forward on that just due to availability of vehicles.
Thanks, Brian. That's interesting what you and Kirk had to say. I think our process has been that during our annual retreats, we kind of get an update on our climate action plans. Is that still your plan going forward, Kirk, given when we'll be doing our updates?
Yeah, we definitely during the retreat we can have some time to discuss the priorities and the projects that we're looking at to continue to reduce the emissions as well as increase sequestration. And then the third component is our ecosystem resiliency work. And so we have projects moving on all the fronts. And then what I was speaking to was just the inventory, the hard number calculation part, and that's still going to be at springtime.
Okay. All right. Looking forward to that. And then on to slide.
Before you go, can I ask a question on this before you go to the next one, if you don't mind?
Sure.
You mentioned something I thank you for taking us back to this slide. I had put in here a note about telecommuting. So do we want to amend this slide to include telecommuting? Because that's a rather more recent thing. I leave that to you guys, but it's not just carpooling and such. And the other is, where do we account for, remind me where we account for in the climate action plan, both grazing, cattle grazing, and because it does have, some impact and benefits as well, not a question of the benefits. And also construction activities like the AO. It's not an ongoing thing, but are we working to try to offset the impacts of the construction at the AO?
Maybe I'll take the first one.
For instance,
and then
yeah.
You can take the next couple. So telecommuting is something that we've already implemented. We are in a hybrid work environment. So identifying it as a project in the action plan, probably not the best place, but it will be discussed and assessed in terms of the emissions that we have avoided as part of the climate action plan analysis that is happening. So it will get wrapped up in there. And then Kirk, do you want to take the next two?
At least the next one, and then I'll maybe comment on the last one. So in terms of the emissions from cattle grazing, we are tracking that, and we do have different pilot projects that we're working on to look at ways to both reduce, but primarily offset the emissions from the cattle grazing. We removed it from our emissions reduction targets for the district's operations because it does operate or function somewhat outside of the rest of the district's operating the business of the district. And so in addition to working with our tenants on some of the timing of the grazing and some of the pilot projects to see if there are ways to reduce emissions, there's quite a bit of work though that we're looking to offset through other projects such as windrows or riparian restoration are two very promising ones. We we did have our science panel work on this topic and develop recommendations for reductions in this sector. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but that's the primary work that we're doing in looking at the grazing emission.
Yeah, it'd be the offsets, yeah.
Yeah.
More of a focus on offsets, correct?
Yes, yeah. Oh, I did remember the last point I wanted to make with this, which is we derive a lot of co-benefits from cattle grazing. So are also offsets that can be realized through wildland fire emissions that are avoided through management of the fuels with cattle grazing. And so that's another factor in there, but it becomes a very complicated formula that we're going to wrestle with it and see what we can come up with and bring that back to the board. But it does, there's a lot of speculation that goes into some of the calculations of carbon emissions avoided through the grazing versus emissions that are attributable to the cattle.
Got it. Thank you. And then if we're trying to work towards offsets for construction activities, especially such as the AO.
Yeah, and maybe someone else might be a little bit more attuned to this than I am, but I'm thinking that we were not calculating any of the emissions for the construction of 50/50.
Okay. It's fairly common for organizations. I mean, it's like I've seen many organizations who don't include X, Y, or Z in their climate action plans and calculations of greenhouse gas reductions. And so I just want to suggest that perhaps we could look a little more holistically than selectively, if that makes sense. It's a very common thing that entities do. So, okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Sue, I think you had an opportunity, but anything else before we move on?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if I had anything else. Sorry, Brian, if you could go to slide 66. This may involve Kirk again. Is this the one with Alma? Yeah, the Alma Bridge Road Newt Passage and the Alma Bridge Road Wildlife Passage. I was, wow, that number in FY25 for the Wildlife Passage really jumped out at me because that's even more than the Highway 17 crossing. And so I understand we're probably gonna have to do some heavy lifting, pardon the pun down there, but is the Alma Bridge Road Newt Passage, it was at VP 22-001. Is that kind of the setup for us then to understand what the FY24, FY25 expenses will be for the line below it?
Yes, and obviously we will have, much better figures once we complete design and get more agreements with the county. So that's where we're projecting here for expensive costs for Alma Bridge Road. I will note that you may be comparing design figures for the Highway 17 crossing, because of course the Highway 17 crossing will far exceed these figures for construction.
Yeah, well, Brian, just what I do is I go down the right column and look for the biggest numbers and then try to understand them. So
right,
when I saw this one,
that's why you're seeing the difference with the projects, because you're not seeing construction costs yet for Highway 17, which will be of a scale much higher.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, thanks. And then last question is the Pescadero watershed sedimentation reduction. I think it's on. Where did I see that? Oh, it's XXXX. I mean, that's a significant amount of money. Is that involved with our Cloverdale acquisition? Is that where that's, because we don't really.
Yeah, so I mean, so the entire watershed. So we also have properties in the upper watershed at Russian Ridge. as well.
Oh, right. I see.
So
I see.
that, yeah, and just like the San Gregorio watershed, the regulatory agencies are looking at the watershed holistically, and we're doing the same thing for our part of it.
I see.
And really both the upper and the lower watershed are important in that regard.
I got it. All right. Got it. Thank you. Okay.
Could I add something to that? I apologize, my internet here at the AO2 dropped out. But the Pescadero, that is a regulatory action. So we just completed the assessment and now we're doing the implementation plan. We're expecting it's going to take us a number of years. We have to lay out an implementation plan that will likely cover 15, 20-year timeframe. And it will include projects in Skyline Ridge, Long Ridge, as well as Russian Ridge, Cloverdale, Big Dipper, some of those other properties. But we have a couple large sites, and then we have many smaller sites that we're going to schedule out.
Got it. Great. Okay. That was really helpful. Brian, are you going to hand off now to Susanna to move into public access?
Yeah, if you're ready to move on.
Well, if actually I was going to ask my colleagues and others, do we need a break? We've got about 2 hours, a little more than 2 hours to go. Do we want to take a short break?
That would be great.
Staff does that work for your schedule?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Let's see, it's now 1:42. Could we get back at, is 1:50 okay? Okay, we'll reconvene at 1:50. Thanks. I'm not, Brian, I'm not surprised that construction's gonna be different, but it was just kind of popped out at me as I was comparing those two line items. That's all. I'm not questioning the amounts.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense that you would look at that and say, and it's just because that Highway 17 is such a long-term project, whereas the Alma Bridge we're hoping to complete in that time frame.
Got it. Great, thank you. Okay, just checking to see if my colleagues are back and that we're ready to go. Looks like they are. Yeah. Okay. So Susanna, I think you're up.
So I will cover the public access education and outreach program. We have quite a robust program for the next 3 years. The total of 37 projects and 4 supporting projects under this program. And many of those projects are multi-year projects. Next slide, please. Rafaela, can you help me advance the slide?
Susanna, you may need to speak a little closer to the microphone.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I am waiting for Rafaela to help me advance the slide. Let me see if I can. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. So one of the key category of public access projects are projects that support regional trails. The projects that list on this slide are key projects that we have been actively working on, will continue to work on in FY23 to support regional trail efforts. And the project that I would highlight out of this list is the Purisima to the Sea Trail and Parking Area Feasibility Study. You're probably familiar with the Purisima to the Sea Trail. It's an important regional trail that connects Purisima Preserve to the coast, and also going to be a part of the future Bay to the Sea Trail. As part of this feasibility study, we analyzed opportunity for the final alignment of this multi-use trail. We also looked at pedestrian crossings over Highway 1 and Verde Road, which is a county road. We also looked at new parking area and trailhead. The work is well underway. We have conducted resource survey, technical studies, and we also presented the opportunity and constraint report to the board end of last year. We are now in the conceptual design phase. We are looking at site design and also parking alternative. We are actively working on engaging the stakeholders as part of this process. We have individual stakeholder meetings. We have online survey. We are planning to host open house and about to bring the conceptual design to the board, actually to PNR first for their review. We think that we will be able to wrap up the feasibility study in FY23. Ultimately, it will bring the conceptual design for the board approval and confirm next step in FY23. Once we confirm the next step by the board, we will move into implementations. And if you looked at our 3-year program, you will see that we have included actually several projects to implement the Turismo to the Sea Trail and parking area. Several projects include projects that will be led by our planning department for updating the use and management plan, and also conducting CEQA for all the proposed improvement. We will have a project that will be led by our land and facility department for trail design and construction. Also a project will be led by our engineering and construction department for parking area. So all those projects, if you looked at our 3-year program, you will see those projects are included in FY24 and FY25. Next slide, please. Another big category for public access are projects that expand public access at our preserves. There are a lot of projects on the list supporting that goal. I just wanted to highlight a couple projects here, just like Brian, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I want to highlight a couple projects at our La Honda Creek Preserve because those two projects goes hand in hand. The first one that I want to talk about is the Phase 2 Trail Connections. This project implements the master plan for La Honda Creek Preserve. A Phase 2 trail visions aim to create a trail system that connects the preserve up and down. The trail system is quite impressive if you have the opportunity to take a closer look at it. It uses new trail to connect existing roads and trail to create this very expensive trail system within the preserve. The work is well underway. We have conducted scouting. We also started a lot of technical studies. The board recently approved the contract for a consultant to help us with design and construction oversight. In FY23, we plan to start with the trail design and also plan for permit applications. We do anticipate the permitting process will take a year to complete, and we anticipate by FY25, we can move into starting constructions of Phase 2 trials. Another project that we're working on concurrently for La Honda Creek Preserve is the La Honda Parking and Trail Access Feasibility Study. You are very familiar with this project because this project implements and evaluate the recommendation from the La Honda Public Access Working Group. The working group made recommendation for the district to consider several locations for public access and bringing the access to the central part of the preserve. The feasibility study looked at those sites recommended by the working group. We are currently conducting technical studies we are gonna do continue with our public engagement to get feedbacks from the community as part of our feasibility studies. We anticipate the feasibility study will extend into FY24, and by FY25, we will be able to move into the implementation phase of the parking and trailhead access. One of the questions was raised at the retreat from the board about what about the connection between the trail system that will be created as part of the phase 2 project, as well as the parking area that we will be able to implement after the feasibility study? And that is good questions. We think that once we confirm the parking area as part of the feasibility study, we will be able to look at that connection as part of the implementation starting in FY25. So I will end here. As part of my highlights, there's a lot of projects that we will be working on to support expanding public access at different preserves, such as here, the Bear Creek Redwood. There's multiple projects that we are working on. Hawthorns, we will be also working on projects that will support the multiple locations of the preserve. So Rafaela, if you can advance the slide to the next one. And here you are. This is the list of all the projects that we will be working on under the public access and education and outreach program. I think we have 2 slides to list all the projects. And I'm going to pause here to see if you have any questions on the projects that I just highlight, as well as projects on this list.
All right, thank you. I'll take the hint from Director Holman. Director Sear, do you want to go first?
I don't have any specific questions on this one. Thank you.
Okay, Director Holman.
Not currently, thank you.
Okay. Could you go back to go back to slide 71? Yeah. Couple quick questions. This topic came up in our discussion during our last meeting, and the Paulin Bridge replacements. It looks like AA05-012. Could someone refresh my memory? I thought those were in La Honda, but over by Highway 84. And there's some comments were made during the discussion that made me kind of wonder, where are those? Could someone help me with that?
Yes. So yes, it is in La Honda Preserve. It's not close to Highway 84. It's actually close to, it's up in the upper portion of the preserve. It's close to Highway 35. This topic actually came up when we recently discussed the Redwood Cabin projects. And the reasons that the bridge was mentioned as part of the Redwood Cabin draft environmental impact report is that there's a creek crossing at that location that currently doesn't have the capacity to support heavy truck traffic.
Oh, I see.
And so as part of the Redwood Cabin projects that we have to, if the decision is to move forward with removal
Right.
of the cabin, that we
Right.
have to put in temporary
Oh, I got it. Okay,
pausing. And
I see.
this project is here because for long term, we still have to look at improving the creek crossing for
Patrol
and emergency
maintenance. Yeah, right.
main purpose of this project.
That's great, Susanna. Thank you. Yeah, because I think that's the old Allen Road, which used to go all the way through. And so it's not increased public access per se. It's actually for service reasons, right? Got it. Okay, thank you. The ADA barrier replacements or area ADA barrier removal. And Susanna, can you remind me, are we getting any federal or state help for that? Because gosh, it's an important thing to do, but it's a lot of money.
Right. So the projects that right here, it's district funded project primarily.
Yeah.
We systematically remove barriers identified in the ADA transition plan. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we a lot of our projects that we're currently doing are improving our restroom, signage improvement, and some road improvement and parking area improvement. Not a lot of opportunity for outside grant fund. However, we do have a very proactive grant department, and there's some conversations happening. We are working on a pretty good size easy access project right now as part of the barrier removal program to improve easy access at 3 of our popular preserves, and potentially there's some opportunity there. So that's what we are looking into right now.
Okay, great. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I think I have one more question, see if I can get to my notes here. Oh, last one. I've heard this term a couple of times and I see it on the, where is Spooky Knoll? What is that?
It's in El Sereno.
Oh,
And the project is part of the Highway 17. Brian talks about the Highway 17 projects that's actually 3 components, right? One is the wildlife crossing. The other one is the trail crossing. And the third component is really the connecting trail that's leading to the trail crossing and the pedestrian crossing. And the Spooky Knoll Trail is part of the connecting trail. It's within our preserve outside of the Caltrans right away, something that we can move forward and implement. And that's why we're putting onto our work plan that we will be working on it in FY 2025.
okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues?
Yes, please. Along that line, I also had a mark here I'd overlooked. Where is the 31903? Where is that Highway 35 multi-use trail crossing?
That is at our Purisima North Ridge parking area. So the crossing is right at that near that area. And then we looked at any feasible options to install that crossing to connect the preserve and the parking area, as well as other improved regional trail improvement that is on the other side of Highway 35.
Okay, great. And this one's, thank you for that. And this is a little bit out of context, but the last item on this page is Long Ridge. And I don't think that any of us thanked the staff for, is that right? Yeah, isn't Long Ridge where the juvenile mountain lion was found that was then taken to the Oakland Zoo? Was that Long?
There's Thornwood.
Thornwood, yeah. And I don't think we've appropriately thanked staff for being Johnny on the spot with that, setting up cameras and everything. So I don't want to digress from the budget conversations, but my goodness, what great work, and thank you all.
It's turned out to be a really nice story. Unfortunately, the cub couldn't be returned to its mother, but it's being taken care of at the Oakland Zoo and will be an ambassador for the species in the future.
That's terrific. And they never found out what happened to the mom, did they?
The mom was seen on camera, and she was thin as well, which was part of the rationale for understanding that probably trying more to reunite them wouldn't be successful. So it's hopeful without having the cub to take care of that she'll be able to provide for herself.
Well, thank you. Sorry for the derailment here of the conversation, but I've been meaning to want to thank you guys. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Susanna. I think we're ready to move on.
Ryan, you're muted.
All right. All right, so starting out with this page with facilities and structures, of course, you know, we'll just be wrapping up the administrative office. So I decided to talk about the Sierra Azul Ranger residence. Yeah, as you may or may not be familiar with, we have two residential structures on the property on Pheasant Road. And one has been long-term occupied by one of our maintenance supervisors and provides an important on-site presence at the property. And then for quite a while, the other residence served as our South Area office. And it was not really an adequate facility by any means for an office. It was just an older residence. And as you know, we have developed since then the Campbell office on Christich Lane, which is now functioning as an excellent South Area office for both our maintenance and our patrol staff. So that residence is currently unoccupied, and you would have thought it would have been a relatively easy permitting issue to permit the just repairs that needed to occur with the residence, but it certainly got much more complicated than that, in that the county only had the parcel permitted for one structure. And this is something we run into all too frequently, where you have one structure or two structures, and you would think that those would be permitted or grandfathered in. And quite often, just given the nature of the rural areas that we work in, they haven't been permitted. So we've been working with the county and particularly engineering construction to look at the permitting alternatives for the Ranger residents. And it looks like a modification perhaps of the residence to remove add-on and then repairs is going to work permitting wise for the county. So that project will move into next year with design and permitting, and then probably wrapping up construction the following fiscal year. And so we will finally, and if you remember the residence distribution that we've reviewed back in February with the board, we don't have a lot of particularly patrol coverage in our south area as far as Ranger residences. So that would be designated as a Ranger residence and really be important for our circulation and be able to respond to call outs after hours for our south area. So that project, and I'm highlighting it because it is one of those issues where you would think, oh, this is an easy one. Just you have an existing structure and fix it up. But we actually have to permit it almost as a new structure. And that's why it's taken a little bit longer, but it is in progress, and we will move into design and then eventually construction. And then for the next one, we're actually not on this page, but we've had a lot of discussion about it. So I wanted to highlight the financial financial and organizational sustainability model update. And we are looking at that as probably over 2 fiscal years and hopefully within the time frame of about a year. So wrapping up sometime in fiscal year 24. And really to take a fresh look at our organization or our needs. There are quite a few things. Probably the biggest, most evident is the need for fuels management and implementation of a wildland fire resiliency program. That is all new information since the original formation, FOSM was developed in 2015. But that's not the only aspect. We have lots of new information. Certainly, societally, what we've seen and gone through with DEI efforts, lots of different aspects that we want to look at holistically. And what do we need to do as an agency to grow and deliver our mission? And then, of course, a big part of that study is not only what do we want to do to deliver our mission and to respond to the needs of our communities, but what can we afford to do and what is sustainable over the long term. So what you see there for funding is to hire a consultant to help do that process, to update that study. Fortunately, it was a very high quality study and will serve as a great framework and foundation to build upon to do an update. One other project that I'll touch on, just because it's one of the high dollar ones, which I'll go to the next slide. I think it's this one, is the radio system assessment and upgrade. And if you remember, and this is kind of a reminder, what we're trying to do with this project is expend roughly half the funds this current fiscal year, and then the other half this coming fiscal year. And we're not sure, because it's dependent on actual equipment delivery, whether we'll be able to do all of the expenditures planned for this fiscal year. But if we don't, some of that funding and expenditure will shift over into the fiscal year 23. And in this next fiscal year, we will wrap up that improvement project, which will give us coverage for our coastal area, and then just modernization update of all our radio equipment so that we can continue to communicate with ourselves and with allied agencies for emergency response. So that's all I had, kind of generally highlighted updates, and we have the 2 pages of the projects that we can go through if there are any questions from the board.
All right, thank you. Go to my colleagues. Any questions for Brian?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
I have one question, I think. I think just one question. It's 35010, and it's referenced on page 122 in our binder. And the scope is to, let me be more clear here. It's structure disposition. And it's complete implementation actions for structure evaluated in fiscal year 2022, conduct research and assess conditions of an additional 2 or 3 structures, and develop disposition recommendations. We had some time ago a plan to evaluate the structures that MidPen owns, to do an evaluation of condition and whether they were historic or not. And I haven't seen anything come forward in a while to advance that inventory. And just wondering what the status of that is and if there's funding needed for that, so we don't end up being so behind on understanding condition of buildings.
This is Anna. So what the plan is, and let me know, I guess, for all of you, let us know if this is inconsistent with the board direction, was to essentially, as we move forward with building assessments, we roll those findings into our inventory. So it's an iterative process, and it's year to year. And so what we've done is every year we're programming essentially time to both to assess and then also to carry out board direction on a select number of buildings, because we can't take it all obviously in one year.
Sure.
So so that's what we've been doing in the last couple of years, and that's what we're planning to do here in each of the upcoming fiscal years, is to essentially bring forward a few structures. The latest batch was essentially Redwood Cabin, Beatty House and the La Honda White Barn, and there will be others that will be coming in the years that are forthcoming, to essentially evaluate, assess, identify options, cost estimates, and then based on our evaluation of board policies, develop recommendations, and then the board makes the final decision as to how to manage that structure. And then we build into our budget the implementation of that. So that's the process we've been doing and propose to carry out here as part of our capital improvement program.
So I had recalled that what we were going to do, and I can't promise I'm 100% accurate on this, but I thought what we were doing was being proactive in doing what some would call a windshield survey to see what buildings look to be needing attention, and then to see which ones were potentially historic and do kind of an inventory of those, rather than waiting till, okay, we're going to do 3 a year, because we own hundreds of buildings, right?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a couple different things going on here. So the the 3 structures that the general manager mentioned were structures that were identified either in the Lahana master plan or Beatty, the disposition was looked at separately. Typically with the structure disposition project, we are looking at dilapidated houses that are in need of demolition. And there's a long list of those that very few of them, well, some of them just because the age would need a historic evaluation. But there are very few that are the kind of evaluation where then the board is needing to take a detailed look at to decide, whether you're going to save the structure or not. Quam and Smith House that we looked at were certainly more at those borderlines where you could go either way with both those structures, which the board, of course, did, deciding to demolish the Smith House and deciding to keep the Quam House as long as the road improvements were set, were at a reasonable amount. But separate from that, we have a responsibility for managing all of our residential properties, which are where most of our major structures are as in the residential program. So for instance, and this is regardless whether they have historic status or not.
Right.
So the
Sure.
Fremont Older House has a national historic status. Whereas the Thornwood House, it was evaluated and it was deemed not significantly historic. But both those houses we are having, because they have been under a management agreement for quite a period of time and not under direct district management, a second party. We had an agreement with them to actually do the maintenance and upkeep of the property. So both of them were going through a process where we're just doing a home inspection. That will generate the list of repairs and improvements needed. And then we will look at what we are doing as far as whether we'll go more to a regular month-to-month residential agreement for those 2 houses or enter into another long-term management agreement for them. So, and that most of the houses are just that are occupied are regular annual inspections that you look at what needs to be done. You talk to the resident, what they have identified and are requesting be done to the property. And that's how the usual upkeep, all that is tracked in CityWorks to see what the needs are, the age of different elements of the structure. And then there's the added element that we mentioned at the last meeting of the upgrades for climate improvement.
Right.
We have not done that district-wide, although that is something that we are moving forward to evaluate what we can do. There are individual houses that are getting minor upgrades to windows or installation that will be that add to that effort. But we are also looking forward to a district-wide residential evaluation. So I hope that gives a little bit better picture of the wide range of types of houses and structures that we have. We have some that are abandoned. Those are the ones that typically would end up on the structures disposition list. We have our regular residential structures. And then we also have some structures that are in particular management agreements, two of which Fremont, Older, and Thornwood we're looking at for a more in-depth evaluation.
That is very helpful. The one missing piece for me in there is like the buildings that are abandoned. I remember at a meeting a long time ago that Laura Jones of Stanford said that if we wanted to have help with evaluating structures, that she would, I'm going from memory here, so don't hold me to the exact words, but I sort of remember that she would offer to put together some professionals that could help assess the various buildings, whether they're occupied or not. So anyway, it's, yeah, I appreciate what the district does. And it seems like there are buildings that are, whether they're barns or whatever they are, that it'd be good to know what they are before they decline further. So, and I haven't seen all the structures certainly that MidPen has. So I don't want to belabor the point here, but I just didn't see anything budgeted for that sort of inventory endeavor.
And then the other thing to add is we are not going out and doing a historic evaluation of every district structure without the need for it. However, we have set up the internal guidelines, and we have an on-call consultant that can do historic evaluations. So that can be done quickly when needed to evaluate a house prior to work or a disposition decision.
You're saying house, but I bet you mean more than house, right?
Houses, sorry.
No, I know. I meant you probably mean more than house. You probably, because that would probably include barns and other stuff.
Oh, yeah, all types of structures.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And then just one last note, we do have an operating budget, operating project in the planning department page. No cost to it because it's really all staff time. It's to essentially build in the information that we have of our structures in paper form into our GIS and electronic files, which is another key step. It's sort of iterative and it's progressive, but that's one piece that we need to do so that we can start building a more robust inventory.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, Director Holman? Director Holman?
I'm sorry, I shook my head. So no, thank you.
All right. Just for the record, I'm no surprise. I think I come down on the opposite side of Director Holman on most issues around structures, and so I'm actually quite pleased with the way staff's approaching this as far as managing our structures and where do we want to put the district's money and time. So, and yeah, I just want to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from on that one. All right.
I will.
So with that,
can I make one last point? Just one last comment about that is, I think we can see with the excuse me, it does come down to a matter also of money and solid waste, because removing a building, if it happens to be historic, is not inexpensive. So that's the other thrust of my point.
yeah, we could debate that. So I'll drop it because that's not on point for this discussion. So thank you. Let's see, other questions on this? Jed, I think you said you were good, right?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. Brian, back the public GIS hub, was it the previous slide? I wasn't sure what that was. And I think your previous slide, did that have an explanation? Oh, no, there it is. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I moved forward to go to the historic resources procedural guide that the general manager was referring to, but
Yeah.
right below that is the public GIS hub. So I mean, and I'll briefly, and then, or Casey, would you like to address that as your camera's on?
Yeah, sure. So the Public GIS Hub is a place on our website that we will be providing interactive maps to the public. We'll be creating interactive maps and dashboards. And part of the Trail Information Project will be shared through the Public GIS Hub on a dashboard. So it'll be just a great place to share our
Right.
GIS data with the public.
Fantastic. And other partners and so on. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah.
That's very helpful. Great. Okay. I didn't have any other questions. This is all looks great to me.
All right, and I think we may have moved through faster than we had even intended. So actually that brings us to the end of the presentation of all 4 of the program areas for our capital improvement and action plan.
Okay. I want to make sure that my colleagues and I have an opportunity to kind of comment about the overall process and any other things that we want to bring up. So I guess that's after the public comments. Yeah. So with that, Jen, do we have any public comments?
Director Riffo, we do not have any public comments on this item or request to speak.
Wow. We're going to spend $84 million of the public's money and they don't have any comments. So I guess they're trusting us. That's great. With that, I'll bring it back to the committee then, unless staff had any other comments they'd like to make before we get into our comments and direction section. No?
No, we'd love to hear from you.
Just one thing really quickly, committee members. We did cover this in the earlier slides, primarily in the first meeting, but I just want to make sure if there were any questions or requests related to the department pages, which is section 5, that we hear from you today. But I think we covered them, but I just want to make sure that that was the case with you as well. You feel you covered them sufficiently.
I felt that Stefan did that last time, but I'll ask my colleagues, do they have any questions on that section?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Great. So let's open it up then for any other further questions by the committee or comments or direction. So who would like to start?
Well, I'll start since I haven't thrown in a whole lot of questions. I really appreciate the thoroughness with which this is put together. The response to the first committee's meeting, to do that in such a quick turnaround time, I think is quite good. And I appreciate the thoroughness with which the questions that have come up have been responded to. So I look forward to bringing this to the whole board. So thank you very much. And Kurt, thank you for your willingness to shift your time scale for this.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Director Holman?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Our staff is so impressive. It's like, so there's somebody that I have known for many, many years, and there's a particular area of expertise, and one of my comments about him is like, you can't ask a question that you didn't know the answer to in that particular realm. And that's sort of how I feel with it is how I feel about our staff. It's like, can you really ask a question that staff doesn't have a ready answer for? The expertise, the knowledge, and the commitment is just pretty amazing and pretty awesome. So, and the amount of work that goes into creating a budget like this is, you all know better than I, pretty amazing and time consuming and detail oriented. So I appreciate all that went into this, and I don't have any other comments beyond things that I brought up during the process, but appreciate very much the work of staff.
Great. Thank you. I have a question and then some comments. The question is to, I'm not sure who to address this to, but next steps. So we go to the board, and what will the board see, and what do we as a committee need to be prepared for there? Thank you.
I can try to answer that. So the board will see most of what we've discussed in these last 2 meetings. Of course, there'll be an accelerated process because we don't have that much time in one evening. A lot of the slides will survive. A lot of them won't. we're going to collapse some of the information such that we can get through the entire process probably in about 2 to 3 hours rather than 2 different meetings. That's the way we've done it in other years, and it seemed to have worked quite well. And that's at the board meeting on the May 25th.
Right.
Then there's also the controller's report where Mike Foster
Right.
basically opines on the budget itself. And then the plan is, well, if there's any rework that we need to do based on May 25th, then we would have a third ABC meeting on May 31st. And otherwise, and I think this only happened once or twice since I've been with the district. And then June 8th, we move for adoption of the budget and action plan, of the finance policies, of the, there's a couple of other items that we'll need to go through as well, like the combat class schedule, et cetera.
Right. Okay. All right. Can I comment on that, Stefan, or did you have? Is
Of
that
course,
it?
absolutely.
Great. And I'd like Jed and Karen to comment on this, but let's face it, this is an 80 slides, right? And what, 200 page? I don't know how big this book is, but it's like 200 pages.
Oh,
So
more than that, Kurt.
okay, a lot. And I'm just wondering, it's right for us to go through this. So I really have appreciated both my colleagues and staff, kind of all the preparation and walking us through this. But oh my gosh, I think the board, it especially given a 2-hour time slot, I just want to make sure, and I know we've done this many years now, and there's some years seems like they go well, and some years seems like it goes on and on and on. Of how do we make sure that we are efficient with our board's time, both in preparation as well as the presentation. So that's what the reason my question, Stefan, are they going to get everything that we got, and then they're going to have to kind of decide what questions they want to ask during these 2 hours?
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, basically, we typically do go through it with ABC in greater detail, of course. And I do believe, at least in prior years, the board definitely relies a lot on the pre-work that the ABC committee does.
Yeah.
That we've been doing these last 2 meetings. Do you think it would help if you had a preamble as chair of the ABC, perhaps, to I don't know.
Well, why don't let me open it up to Karen and Jed. How are you all feeling about this? And Jed, you've been through this many times. Karen, this is really your first time on the committee. I just want to make sure we're making best use of staff's time as well as the board's time in going through I mean, this is a lot of very important information. I just want to make sure we're setting realistic expectations.
I'm trying to kind of process in my mind, a board member sitting, not having had the experience of the committee.
Yeah.
And it's kind of overwhelming. This thing shows up. So I was reflecting on, the brief comment or note to the other members of the board that when they get this, that the department summaries are there, but you're not really spending a lot of time looking at individual project budgets. At least I don't. The master lists of the projects for that section or department, I think is really helpful. Just sort of, of these projects, which ones, what are 3 in that area or 4 in that area that are going to require a hugely significant amount of staff time as well as finances. Because you can scan through the table of contents page, the department summary for X department, And then there are, 16, 18, 20 projects, 25 projects in that area. I like the fact that they're listed with, oh heck, I tabbed them and I wish I had tabbed them earlier. It's easier to manage. That might be a suggestion too, to tell people to tab the project list page. So, or the way you went through it, Kurt, glancing at the numbers column, the ones that jump out at you are the ones that we normally, would raise a question. And if say 3 or 4 are just highlighted similar to what has been done in our 2 meetings, not so much as, I think more in terms of what is the staff cost going to be in terms of energy and effort and focus, that these are, half a dozen that are real critical, and the others will slip in when we have some space. Just a thought. I'm not being able to spell that out as smoothly as I'd like, but it gives you an idea of what I'm thinking anyway. That might help move it forward, because there's no way in heck we're going to get through 220 pages thoroughly. I mean, and that's a 5, 6, 7 hour process individually, so anyway, those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
Yeah, I don't know if this has been done before, but listening to what Jed had to say in his comments, when we started each section, there was a slide that introduced the area, and it was a visual slide. I'm just wondering, and I don't know, I really want your feedback. What if there was that slide, and then the next slide was a summary of the section? As opposed to having like numerous slides that go into more detail. If there's a summary slide, an intro slide, and then a summary slide, and then as Jed said, and I think that's right, that project details can be found on page, in this case, I'm looking at page 113 in the binder. And then the support slides there too, because it's a lot easier. And I'm thinking about the board consumption, not the board meeting at the moment. It's a lot easier to go through, let's say 80 slides than it is 220 page binder that has, 10-point type and sometimes, whatever, 50 items on a page. So does that make any sense in terms of like what to focus the board on for their preparation? And then with the presentation to the board, maybe something like the intro, the summary, reference to the project page. And then I don't know if some of the slides could be collapsed or not. I don't have enough memory of which ones might or might not be, but does that make any sense at all? Stefan, I'll look at you maybe or Anna.
Just let me throw in something. I like the idea of the photos. It kind of reminds us why we're doing all this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wasn't trying to get rid of those. I was just adding something behind it. Yeah.
No, I know, and I appreciate that.
Basically, the documentation that the board will receive is the near final budget book itself. Right? So it'll look a little bit different than what the committee has received as far as per project and such. Each project will have its own page, of course, and that's what the different sections. Currently, there are different sections. That's what they'll represent. There's, I believe, 4 sections in the budget book. Those are the attachments to the board report itself. Then also, we tried to send the PowerPoint slide a few days ahead of time, or at least a day ahead of time, to the board so they can flip through it as well, to kind of anticipate what's coming that evening.
Would it be possible to send the presentation a few days ahead of time so that the board can actually go through that instead of going through the 220 pages in great detail to help facilitate an effective and efficient meeting?
Yeah, and we will try to do that. Sometimes we do work on the PowerPoints up to almost the last minute, but or we send a draft and note it as such that there may be changes. Of course, the dollar amounts don't change, and that's pretty much fixed at this point. And I think we've had conversations with the committee in the past as well. How can we improve the process? And the consensus was pretty much, well, it is a good process. We have a good process. We involved the board very early on, in December already. And then we run through the projects and the programs in March, so that the entire board has weighed in early on the high level. And then here with the committee, we go in a deeper level as far as the dollar and cents. We're also in a fortunate position that we're able to add to our reserves with a balanced budget each year. So that makes it a little bit easier, in addition to the fact that we are a single purpose agency. I still have flashbacks sometimes to work for a city or a council where there are, or a county where there are competing interests, such as police, fire, public works, etc., that compete for the scarce resource dollars. We don't have that difficulty or complexity. We're single purpose, which makes our budget a lot more straightforward. And those combinations of the process and our single purpose, and the fact that we are able to add the reserves each year, have made it a lot easier, I would think, for us to put the budget together and also to discuss it with the board and for the board to adopt it at the end of the day.
I'd like to maybe jump in, and thank you, Jed and Karen and Stefan, for sharing. So I'm going to morph maybe a couple of the comments. I think that the board should get the budget book, right? And maybe what I should do is someone said is I could also send a note out to the board to, number one, focus on the slides. So to follow up on Karen's point, let's get those slides, and sorry, Stefan, let's just nail them. Let's get them done. Because one of the things that kind of drives me a little bit nuts is I go through the slides, mark pages and everything in my comments, and then you guys show up and you change the slide numbers. So I've got to go back and change everything. So it's just kind of from a matter of meeting facilitation, it would be great if you could send the slides out and we could focus the board's attention is work on, focus on the slides. Certainly read through the budget book, use the budget book as detail, but we're going to walk through the slides, right? And then to follow up a little bit on what Karen, I think, was alluding to, or maybe it was Jed who was alluding to, let's start at a high level. Let's endeavor to maybe a half hour or 45-minute presentation, if that, and let the board then decide where they want to dive into more detail and, refer to the budget book or whatever. But I think kind of keeping it at a higher level, because you're right, that's our job, is to actually have gone into the detail. And, I, as a board member, I was kind of counting on the committee to have asked all of those hard questions. And so I wouldn't have to ask those as well. So would that make sense? Because, if you do like focus on the slides, roughly half an hour or 45 minutes, whatever, and then there's probably gonna be 45 minutes of questions, right? In one form or another. So, there's your hour and a half to 2 hours. Does that compute for you?
Sure. I'm all for a shorter presentation. I mean, that works. Like jokingly, but I can sum up the entire budget in one page. I have to.
Right.
But there's definitely things that we can streamline or reduce, like changes by department. Maybe we don't need to step through that by department. We have the top level, we have the projects, and that really drives the budget.
That's right. I agree. Yeah.
There's things that we can do.
Jed and Karen, does that sound all right to you?
It does, but I was also, commenting that, the budget process, as it's gotten more and more refined, as, you guys have won awards for several years. I certainly don't want to lose that high level of quality, but yeah, if we could streamline a little bit, the more lead time the other board members are going to have the more comfortable they're going to feel, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. And agree with the approach that we've kind of identified here is we're all pretty much in concert. The only thing that I would be kind of like, leave it to staff is I don't want to say it's like keep the presentation to a half an hour. It's like, I want you to take what you need to take to get the story across.
Mhm.
And I don't want to try to put my view of what an efficient meeting would be to that. If it can be done in 45 minutes or an hour, that's great. But I don't want to put parameters on that. I do agree with what seems like we've all agreed to is like get the presentation out to board members as soon as possible. If there are little nits that you have to do to it, like you say, the numbers aren't going to change, then that's fine. And of course they'll get the binder. Of course they will. But I think it's going to be a more informed process if board members can focus their attention on the big picture and then where they have a particular interest or question, then they can refer to the binder. So kind of the opposite of what we did, and for good reason. We did what we did. Is that what you guys are thinking?
Yeah, I think
I think
that's what
that's a good
I said. Yep,
Yeah.
great.
All right. I hear you.
Are we clear enough, Stefan?
I believe so. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that was about process. Any other comments that my colleagues want to make just about what we have just spent the last 7 hours talking about and 10 hours preparing for?
Well, I really appreciate the auxiliary staff that's sort of sitting in the wings ready to and answer a question while they're still trying to do their job. So very, right as you mentioned, Karen, Johnny on the spot and full and thorough answers to questions that have come up. And the availability of that answer, I think, is really, really significant. It's a whole different experience from my point of view of here's the answer to your question. If I have no idea, but I'll get back to you. The contrast is really very strong, I think, and I appreciate it very much.
Mhm. And gee, were we that well prepared that we finished this at least an hour earlier than was anticipated? Are we that good as a committee? Let's go conquer the world.
Okay, I just had a couple quick comments. Kind of the test that I have going into this, and I think staff did a great job of, number one is, do these projects actually move our mission forward? And that's kind of my test. And secondly is this a good use of taxpayer money for doing these, associated projects? And I think on both of those accounts, as I went through this, I feel pretty good about answering questions from my constituents as to what we're doing and why this is the right thing to do. And I really like how this ties back to our 4 goals of our strategic plan. In fact, there's one slide that kind of ties, here's the projects, here's the money that are going against each of those goals. I really like that. And I also like the wildfire, agriculture, and DEI overlays that we put on that. The one area that maybe we talk about in December coming up is climate change. More and more and more of what we need to be working on beyond our mission is how are we helping resolve this problem? And it's in there, but I just would like to have maybe more of a discussion of how can we make sure that our public understands what we are doing about this incredible problem that no one seems to be really coming up, at least at a federal and even state level, about what are we doing about it. So at a regional level or local level, at least we can say, here's what we are doing, about this potentially overwhelming problem. So maybe that's something we can kick into the December discussion, but that's the only thing that I'd like to kind of see a little bit more overt, if you will. And then the other comment that I think we're doing better this year than we have in the past years, and that is that we've seen our public access kind of explode. We're doing a really good job of trying to open up more preserves, more trails. But I think we've not done a very good job of planning for parking and planning for access. And, you know, as I look through the public access, the number of parking or multimodal access is probably the most I've seen this year than almost any year that I've been working on budgets. So I'm happy to see that, but I think that's a big issue that we need to continue focusing. So I'd really like to thank staff for that. And then the last point is thank you, Stefan and staff, for going through the hiring. I agree with all of these, but it's making me more and more nervous, the fact that our FOSM is getting kind of old, and also there's some things that have changed. That when we did the FOSM back in 2015, you know, we didn't really account for. So it concerns me a little bit that we could be 2 more years before we have our FOSM done. But we're still going to be hiring people and still going to be, you know, potentially impacting how the organization is set up. So I would hope we could accelerate that process a little bit faster. Stefan, if I heard you right, I think you said it could be up to 2 years. I would really like to see us try to do that faster, just because we've got a lot of budget and a lot of hiring that are going to depend to make sure that we have the right plan. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but that's the only other thing that kind of jumped out at me.
So Stefan, maybe before you comment, I could say a few words and then you can add is, what I could say is, I'm hoping that we can come to at least some draft recommendations of what those projections might look like within the next year. And that, you know, it'll take a little longer to get to like a final, you know, print ready report.
Right.
But we'll at least get to those preliminary projections within that year that would help guide us sooner than the final report. But Stefan, do you want to add more to that?
I definitely agree with that. I'm also, well, we should keep in mind that it's a refresh of the FOSM. It's not a complete brand new FOSM, which should help.
Right.
And should also help us get at least preliminary ideas as to which direction the report will go. I know, you know, the original FOSM created new departments, business lines, etc. We're not looking for anything like that. We're looking for metrics. We're looking for staffing levels, for, you know, future growth patterns, etc., which will be a little bit different and hopefully streamlined. But the flip side, it also will involve a lot of staff time to support the consultant that we will need, that we'll be needing to attract, of course, to help us with the work itself.
Right.
Kurt, can I support? I wanted to support what you were saying. And also, I somehow or other overlooked asking this question because I had it highlighted in the binder. I noticed that there's only $30,000 committed, at least what I found. There's only $30,000 committed to consultant to work on the FOSM. And I thought the board had indicated that we wanted external rather than internal leadership and primary work on this. So I was questioning the number of $30,000.
It's really too early to have a firm number on that. We're starting work on the RFP as soon as we're done with the move. And then this summer we'll float the RFP, and by the end of the summer, hope to have some firmer numbers from consultants. And if we need to adjust it, we'll come to the board for adjustment.
Yeah, perhaps that number is pretty low even for a placeholder. I think somebody on the board surely will ask about that, and maybe not. I forgot to, you know, I overlooked asking my question, but it seems like a very low placeholder. So, all right, thanks.
Okay. Great. One last comment that I'd like to make, and then we'll get to the general manager's recommendation. Thank you to staff for, I think this is our first year of a full 3-year plan. So hello, hooray. It's been a long time and it took a lot of work, but wow, this is real. It was really robust. So congratulations and thank you for coming to this. I think we started talking about this about more than 5 years ago, saying, wouldn't it be great? But it seems like we've arrived. So thank you. Okay, so with that, we have a general manager's recommendation in front of us. Are there any other questions or comments? And if not, can we have a motion?
A question, does this require a motion? We did the deed, so does this require a motion?
Director Holman, typically the ABC has recommended board adoption of the proposed budget as the actual action being taken. You are correct that the review and confirm doesn't really need action, but in the past, the Action Plan and Budget Committee has recommended board approval as their action.
Okay, I can make that motion.
Okay, do we have a second for that? Jed, if you won't, I will. I'll second that motion. Maybe we have a roll call vote, please.
I got, suddenly the screen went away and I was logged out of the meeting and I had to re-log in. So it took me a couple of minutes. So I will be happy to second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Seer,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Director Riffle.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all, everyone on the call and everyone that put their time into this. I know this is a process that seems to never end, right? As soon as we finish it, we start again. But wow, it is worth it. This is really robust, and it's no wonder we win awards for these plans. So very impressive, and I'm very excited about the coming year. Any other comments from my colleagues before we end?
Just want to thank both of my colleagues for their flexibility in terms of time. And it looks like we won't need a third meeting. That's fantastic.
Well, we'll see what our board
Oh,
says.
yeah, we.
Maybe wishful thinking, but anyway.
Yeah.
It was
So,
good.
and just to add, the directors mentioned all the managers being here and helping prepare in addition to their staff, the budget. But particularly I want to thank our budget team, Rafaela Duran, Ellie Martinez and Lupe Hernandez, who take all that raw material and put it into that huge document that you have in front of you. So really thank them for all their work in preparing this.
Yeah, an incredible job.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So noted. And thank you, Brian, for calling them out. I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. With that, I believe we've accomplished our objective. I think we're done for the day. So thank you all very much. And this meeting is adjourned.
Okay.